I wanted to talk about two basic things that are pertinent to the Central region specifically, because that's where I've worked my whole career as a forester. And first thing I wanted to talk about is why has it disappeared? And I think many of you have got your own reasons for that. I got out of school back in 1985. I was a graduate here at UT. Very first job I had was with forest industry. And I planted those darn loblolly pines. You know, if I get cut bad, I still bleed pine sap. But as a forester, I worked directly with private landowners, and my charge was landowner assistance and wildlife habitat work. And immediately, I'd get out on private lands, and shortleaf was all over the Cumberland Plateau. You know, it was not uncommon to have it be 20–30% of the basal area, but when you purchased the timber, it was oftentimes 4 or 5 times the value of the hardwood that was there with it. A lot of it had past fire scars. You had some pulpwood, you had some hardwood saw timber, but it was low grade. The wood weighed the same as green as northern red oak. It was phenomenal timber quality. You know, I'm involved with a longleaf effort. Longleaf or shortleaf doesn't have to hold its chin down to longleaf in any way, shape, or form for timber quality. Whether it's dimension lumber for plates and headers and that type of material, solid wood products, makes excellent paper products. Years ago, and Clarence could talk about that for hours, there was actually a tar kiln industry in much of the Central Range states, and it's even used for pole production in other areas. So shortleaf is an extremely high value tree. But when I went out on these private lands, you know, Smokey the Bear had come in. We'd suppress fires for a lot of good reasons at the time. And we had a remnant forest remaining in much of Tennessee, North Alabama, North Mississippi, North Georgia, that was a mixed hardwood shortleaf stand. And I say that because that's a distinct difference between a lot of the areas that McCree and others in the room have worked heavily in the western part of the range, where you have nearly pure stands. Pure stands existed on the plateau. They existed in the Carolinas, but they were far less frequent. It was oftentimes a mixed component. It was there because of soils. It was there because of precipitation. It was there because of climate and elevation, but it was also there because of past land use practices. You know, we too had a lot of landscape scale burning going on. A lot of logging came through back in the 1800s and turn of the century, and that allowed enough sunlight to the ground, enough fire to regenerate shortleaf that would allow it to live and persist long enough to become part of the canopy. Well, when we shut down the fires, that was the beginning of the end for shortleaf, because it was a very high value product. When we went in and cut timber, where we cut it right or wrong, high graded or otherwise, it was always taken care of. It was always removed by the logger. That was where your money was. That was pulled out, and we did not have sufficient sunlight, canopies closed up, no fire back in the landscape, so what shortleaf did regenerate was quickly lost. And so I've seen since just the 1980s in Tennessee, visibly, it's just disappeared. You can see it on the remnants of some stands that didn't get cut along roads and county roads, things like that. On some of the Tennessee state parks, there's still a lot of shortleaf, places that haven't been harvested. But otherwise, a lot of it's disappeared, and it's pretty predictable. Another demise for shortleaf pine was on abandoned agricultural land. A lot of the acres in Tennessee, I don't know what the current information was, but we were gaining forest land for several decades in Tennessee, and a lot of that was abandoned agricultural land. Well, pre-World War II, shortleaf really had an opportunity, because a lot of times those are very infertile ground, been farmed to death. Some of them was heavily eroded, and shortleaf seeded into that and took off. So a lot of these stands now that are on FIA data on private land are abandoned agricultural fields. Okay, well, after World War II, we got synthetic fertilizers. We plant a lot of loblolly in the landscape, so if you've abandoned agricultural land now in much of the central region, it's going to revert to there's a seed source nearby of shortleaf and oftentimes loblolly, and it can't compete with loblolly, so loblolly wins. So we've had a change in land use on agricultural stands, a change in forest fire management, less prescribed fire, fewer landscape scale natural fires, a lot of fire suppression. Not much shortleaf has been planted. I know when I got out of school, which was decades ago, you didn't talk about shortleaf pine. You know, you might talk about it back in the shadows, kind of like a possum back in the dinosaur days, but you didn't talk openly in forestry school about shortleaf. You know, that was well, that doesn't work. We tried it. You know, don't worry about it. Loblolly is the way to go. Well, I'm here to argue, like all of you, that there's still a place for loblolly pine and intensive pine management on private lands, but On a lot of public land and a lot of private land, Shortleaf has got some real opportunities. And that's why, to me, I asked McCree, I said, I want to talk a little bit about why we're here before we take off and do all our strategy and planning and objectives and opportunities. We have an opportunity across 23 states, well represented here in the central region, to manage a tree species that's part of an ecosystem that has disappeared. And everybody looks at the world differently. I look at it as public land or private land issues. On public land, there's a lot of work going on. I've got a Department of Defense background, a lot of work going on with longleaf, a lot of work going on with shortleaf, on national forests. Under ecosystem management, we have a golden opportunity to restore shortleaf ecosystems, however they may be, on tracts of land that we manage for the public vested interest. And so shortleaf is a great opportunity on public land to restore a lot of lost systems that would be hard to do on a landscape scale on private land. We can also put prescribed fire back on a landscape and manage a tree species that on a portion of the landscape can be managed in denser stands for timber production, and in a portion of the landscape more open stands, get the sunlight and fire down the ground, get that herbaceous understory, and manage for early and late succession on the same acre of ground. You know, that's cheating Mother Nature right there. When you can manage for bobwhite quail and RCWs on the same acre of ground, you're really accomplishing something. So on public land, I think we're going to talk a lot about public land this afternoon and tomorrow. That's the anchor point. That's what really drives the stake in the ground, and that's where we're going to have our first and greatest opportunity to do work. But private land is the majority of acres. That's the majority of the loss that's going on, and we've got a lot of folks starting to try to pull the reins on that and make a change. Like John here in Tennessee's got a Shortleaf Initiative, a lot of funding put into it with NRCS, and private land, I would argue, as a past consultant, has perhaps in the long run, it'll be a little slower coming out of the gate, but in the long run has some of the greatest opportunity. Because when you can go as an area forester or private landowner and say, we've got an opportunity for you on your 100 acres to take 50 acres of that after it's cut and plant that back to shortleaf pine and have a mixed stand that we can run a fire through, and you can deer hunt on it, you can have the wildflowers on it, you can have that part of it as an open savanna where you got all the aesthetics, and you can make your 100 acres look like 1,000 acres. And then the other end of the property, we can manage it very intensively for timber production, for high quality tree species. That's a pretty good case to sell right there. It doesn't mean hardwood's not important, doesn't mean there's not a place for loblolly, but it's another tremendous opportunity on private land for a landowner who's interested in managing for timber, wildlife on a longer rotation. So just kind of keep that in mind with our planning, and all of us have got different issues, got different action items on our mind, and economics is going to drive all this. There's already some work going on in longleaf pine, which we hope to bring into the shortleaf community on the economics, where you can go to private landowners and show what your cost benefit is, whether it's a land expectation value, internal rate of return, so you can actually sit down and compare shortleaf pine with loblolly pine with oak management with different opportunity costs. So that's coming down the pike, but I just want to kind of set the stage for some of that this afternoon and tomorrow. But this part of the meeting, you know, this is not a meeting as a presentation, but we all thought on the planning committee that this would be really helpful to kind of set the stage, so bring everybody up to the same level and playing field and kind of thought process before we dive in this morning with the actual work of the meeting. But